The pie was already in the oven when he told me. Not before. Not the night before, when we were still in bed and I asked him, for the third time that week, if everything was okay. Not in the car on the way over, when I had both hands full with the ceramic dish of sweet potato casserole and the foil-wrapped bread, and he didn't offer to take either of them. Not even at the door when his mother hugged him first and then looked at me and said, "Oh good, you brought the casserole. I wasn't sure you'd remember the right recipe this time." I remembered. I always remembered. It was his grandmother's 75th birthday. His family had decided, his mother had decided, which meant the same thing, that we'd do a proper sit-down dinner. Pot roast, roasted vegetables, dinner rolls from scratch, a birthday cake his aunt was bringing from a bakery 40 minutes away, and a pie. Because his grandmother loved apple pie, and because I made it better than anyone in the family. And because that was the kind of compliment that sounded generous while also meaning you'll be making the pie. I'd been up since 6 that morning. The kitchen in his parents' house was large and well-appointed and not mine. His mother kept things in places that made sense to no one but her. I'd spent the first 40 minutes opening wrong cabinets, finding the colander where the mixing bowls should have been, discovering the measuring cups tucked behind a bread machine that hadn't been used since 2009. I didn't ask for help. I knew better than to ask for help. The last time I'd asked where she kept the basting brush, she'd given me a look like I'd asked her to solve a differential equation. His sister was in the living room with her husband. His cousin had driven up from Charlottesville with her boyfriend, who kept wandering into the kitchen doorway, and then wandering back out like he couldn't figure out which room he was supposed to be performing helpfulness in. His grandmother was in the armchair by the window, with a blanket over her knees, watching a cooking show on the small television his mother had moved in there specifically for her. His father asked me how the traffic had been on the way over. That was the extent of the conversation I had for the first 2 hours. My husband, I'll call him that, because that's what he still was. My husband was in the living room. I could hear him laughing. He had a particular laugh he used with his family, a little louder than his real one, a little more performed. I'd noticed it early in our relationship and found it endearing. By year 4, I found it something else entirely. We'd been married 3 years, together for 5. I was 31. I worked in healthcare administration. Not a doctor, not a nurse, not anything with a title that impressed people at dinner parties, but the kind of work that meant hospitals functioned, that billing didn't spiral into chaos, that people who needed care could actually get it in a way the system could process. I was good at it. I'd been promoted twice in 2 years. My director called me the most organized person she'd ever worked with, which I knew she meant as a compliment, even if it sounded like she was describing a filing cabinet. I had given up a conference in Seattle the previous spring because his family had planned a beach trip, and he'd said it would mean a lot if I came. I had rescheduled a dentist appointment 4 times because something always came up on his side. I had learned over 5 years the specific ways each member of his family liked their coffee, their steak, their birthday cards, handwritten, not printed. His mother was very clear about that. None of them knew my director's name. The pie came out of the oven at 4:15. I set it on the rack to cool and started on the gravy, and that's when he came in. He didn't come in to help. I want to be clear about that. He came in because he needed something from the refrigerator. A beer, I think. And I happened to be standing at the stove, and something about the moment must have struck him as the right one. He said, "Hey, I need to talk to you about something." I kept stirring. The gravy needed to be stirred. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said. "About us. About where things are. The thing about gravy is that if you stop paying attention to it, it separates. I don't think we want the same things anymore," he said. "I think we've grown apart. And I think it would be better for both of us if we started thinking about ending things." I turned the burner down. I set the spoon on the rest beside the stove. I turned around. He was holding his beer. He looked like someone who had rehearsed this and was relieved to finally be saying the words out loud. "You're asking me for a divorce," I said. "In your mother's kitchen, while I'm making gravy for your grandmother's birthday dinner." He said something about timing, about how there was never a right time, about how he'd been holding on to this and it wasn't fair to either of us. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about the conference in Seattle. I thought about the rescheduled dentist appointments. I thought about 5 years of learning exactly how his mother liked her coffee. 1 sugar, a splash of oat milk, stirred not shaken, in the blue mug not the white one because the white one was her grandmother's and it was only for display. Okay, I said. He blinked. Okay. I untied the apron. The one his mother kept hanging by the back door. The one with the little roosters on it that she'd had since before I knew any of them, and I laid it over the back of a chair. The gravy needs another 10 minutes on low. The pie should rest for at least 30 before you cut it. The casserole just needs to be reheated at 350 for about 20 minutes. What are you? I'm leaving, I said. You should let your grandmother know dinner is ready by 6. She gets tired after 8. I walked into the living room. His mother looked up. His sister looked up. His cousin's boyfriend, who had finally found his room, looked up from his phone. Thank you for having me, I said. Happy birthday, Grandma June. His grandmother looked at me over her blanket. She was a sharp woman, always had been. She'd grown up in rural Virginia, raised 4 kids largely on her own after her husband left, built a small tailoring business out of the back room of her house. She looked at me with those clear gray eyes and something passed across her face. Recognition? Maybe, or something sadder than that. Drive safe, honey, she said. I got my coat. I got my purse. I left the ceramic dish because it had his grandmother's name on a piece of masking tape on the bottom, which tells you everything you need to know about how long I'd been navigating that family's logistics. I sat in my car in their driveway for exactly 45 seconds. Then I backed out and I drove. I called my best friend from the road. She answered on the second ring the way she always did, like she'd been waiting. I need somewhere to be tonight, I said. You're already on your way, she said. It wasn't a question. She lived 40 minutes north of his parents' house. I spent those 40 minutes with the radio off, watching the highway unspool in front of me in the early dark of November. It was the Saturday before Thanksgiving. Every gas station I passed had orange and brown streamers in the window. My best friend met me at the door with a glass of wine, and the specific expression she reserved for situations she'd been anticipating for longer than I had. She was a paralegal. She had been one for 11 years. She had, over the course of our 12-year friendship, watched me navigate that relationship with the quiet attentiveness of someone who knows better than to say I told you so before the moment actually arrives. She said, "Do you want to talk or do you want to sit?" "Sit," I said. We sat. After a while I talked. What I told her, the kitchen, the gravy, the apron with the roosters, what he'd said, and the way he'd looked while he was saying it, like a man relieved of a burden he'd been carrying for months, or maybe longer, who had decided the back room of his mother's kitchen on his grandmother's 75th birthday was a reasonable place to set it down. What she told me, that she knew a family law attorney, that he was fair, thorough, and did not mess around, that she could text him tonight. It's Saturday night, I said. He owes me one, she said. Also, he's going to want this case. I didn't ask her what she meant by that yet. I slept in her guest room. I slept better than I had in months, which is its own kind of information. The first call came the next morning at 7:42. His mother. I let it go to voicemail. I was sitting at my best friend's kitchen table with coffee and the quiet, and I wasn't ready to give either of them up yet. The second call was my husband at 8:15, then his sister, then a number I didn't recognize that turned out later to be his cousin. Then his mother again. I watched the notifications stack up on the screen the way you watch snow accumulate. Something happening that you can't stop and don't particularly want to. The voicemails filled up by noon. My best friend's contact came over that afternoon. He sat across from me at her kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and asked me questions in the careful, methodical way of someone who already knows the shape of the answer and is just building the record. He asked about the length of the marriage. He asked about assets. He asked whether I had documentation of certain things, and I told him I was organized by nature and by profession, and something in his expression shifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but adjacent to one. Here is what he learned, and what my husband apparently had not fully considered. We owned a house jointly. We had joint accounts. But I also had accounts my husband didn't know the full extent of. Not hidden, exactly, but mine, built over the years of my 2 promotions and my careful attention to the difference between what I earned and what we spent. I had a 4-for-3 buy through my employer. I had invested modestly but consistently since I was 24, which meant since before I had met any of them. I had also, it turned out, kept records of things. Not out of suspicion. I wasn't that kind of person, or hadn't been, but out of habit. The professional deformation of someone who works in healthcare administration, where, if it isn't documented, it didn't happen. The emails about the beach trip. The calendar entries for the conference I'd canceled. 5 years of scheduling and rescheduling and accommodating, preserved in the neat, time-stamped logic of a Google Calendar and an email inbox I'd ever fully cleaned out. The attorney set down his pen. He looked at me for a moment. "You're going to be fine," he said. Which I already knew, actually. But it was useful to hear it from someone with a legal pad. The calls didn't stop on Sunday. They didn't stop Monday either. By Tuesday, I had 19 voicemails. I listened to them on Tuesday evening, sitting in my own apartment. I'd gone home Sunday night, packed what I needed, and realized with a small shock that most of what mattered to me fit into 2 suitcases and a tote bag, with a glass of water and my phone on speaker and a notepad because my attorney had told me to document everything. And I was, if nothing else, a person who documented things. His mother's messages started with "We need to talk" and escalated through "This is not how adults handle things," and arrived, by the 4th message, at something closer to desperate. She needed the insurance information for a thing. She was vague about what thing. She needed to know what I had done with the Christmas card list, because apparently I had been managing the family Christmas card list for the past 3 years, and no one had thought to ask me for it while I was still a person they were speaking to. His sister called to tell me that I was being dramatic. His cousin left a voicemail that I suspect she regretted, because it was at 11:30 on Sunday night, and the audio quality suggested she was in a car and possibly not entirely sober. My husband called 4 times. His messages were shorter. He said he thought we could be adults about this. He said he hadn't expected me to just leave. He said, and this was the one I listened to twice, he said he thought we should talk before I did anything. I wasn't sure what he thought I might do. My attorney filed the initial paperwork on Wednesday morning. I found out later, from my best friend, who found out from her contact at the title company. It's a small, professional world, in ways that only become visible when you need them to be, that my husband had spent Sunday and Monday under the impression that I would come back, that whatever had happened in that kitchen was something that could be smoothed over, apologized for, walked back. That he had told his mother, at some point on Sunday, that I was probably just upset and I'd cool down. I had been cooling down since I was 26 years old and learning which cabinet his mother kept the colander in. The process took 7 months. My attorney was as advertised. Thorough, fair, and completely uninterested in anything except the equitable resolution of the documented facts of the situation. We reached a settlement in June. The house sold in August, in a market that had been kinder to sellers than anyone had expected. My share of the equity, combined with what I'd built separately and what the settlement allocated, left me in a position I hadn't fully expected to be in at 31. Stable, more than stable. I was offered a director position in October at a hospital system 2 states away. I'd applied in September, mostly because my best friend had sent me the listing at midnight with 3 exclamation points and a screenshot of my own resume that she'd apparently been keeping updated on my behalf. I accepted the offer on a Thursday. I told my current director on a Friday. I cried a little, which surprised me. The move was in November. I drove the first day, flew back to get my car, drove the second. I had packed everything I owned in a way that made logical sense, labeled, categorized, nothing misplaced, and unpacked it the same way in the new apartment, which was on the 4th floor with a window that faced west and had good light in the evenings. I found the piece of masking tape the following spring at the bottom of a box I'd missed. His grandmother's name in faded ballpoint on a small strip of tape. which had been stuck to the bottom of the ceramic dish for so long it had left an outline when I peeled it off. I thought about mailing it back. I thought about a lot of things that spring, when there was more time and the light came earlier, and I was learning the rhythms of a new city. What I kept coming back to was not the kitchen, or the gravy, or the beer in his hand while he said what he said. What I kept coming back to was his grandmother, in the armchair with the blanket over her knees, watching me with those clear gray eyes, while the cooking show murmured in the background. "Drive safe, honey." She'd known. Women of that particular generation who'd built things out of very little in back rooms and early mornings. They always knew. I didn't mail the tape back. I kept it. I'm not sure exactly why, except that it seems like record of something, and I had learned a long time ago to keep records. I'm good at my job. I always have been. And I am no one's afterthought, no one's convenience, no one's person who remembered the right recipe. I know that now in a way I only half knew then, standing at a stove on a November Saturday with my hand on a spoon that needed to keep moving. I let go of the spoon. I've never once wondered if I should have held on.